The oatmeal trap after 40. Why a healthy breakfast can quietly push you toward blood sugar spikes, insulin resistance, and mid-morning crashes. There's a reason oatmeal has survived for decades as the poster child of a healthy breakfast. It is cheap, comforting, familiar, and plastered across packaging with words like heart healthy, whole grain, and good source of fiber. For millions of people, especially those over 40 who are trying to eat better, oatmeal feels like the safest possible choice. It feels disciplined. It feels responsible. It feels like the kind of breakfast that should protect your body, not challenge it. But here is the uncomfortable truth. For a large number of people, especially those with insulin resistance, prediabetes, or reduced metabolic flexibility, oatmeal can still produce a meaningful blood sugar rise. And depending on the type of oats, the portion size, and what you add to the bowl, that healthy breakfast can become a quiet metabolic trigger, one that leaves you hungry again too soon, foggy by late morning, and stuck in a cycle of repeated glucose spikes. That does not mean oats are poison. That would be sloppy science. The real story is more nuanced and much more useful. Oatmeal is not automatically healthy just because it is oatmeal. The way it is processed matters. The portion matters. The toppings matter. And if you are over 40, the context of your metabolism matters even more. Today, I want to unpack the real science behind oatmeal, blood sugar, and insulin response. Not with fear-mongering, but with data-driven clarity. Because if you understand what oatmeal is doing inside your body, you can stop guessing and start making breakfast choices that actually support your energy, your appetite, and your long-term metabolic health. The metabolic shift after 40. Why the same breakfast starts hitting differently. A lot of people think metabolism slows down suddenly at 40, as if a switch flips and the body just starts malfunctioning. That is an oversimplification. The evidence suggests that energy expenditure is relatively stable from early adulthood through much of midlife, and the dramatic drop is not simply because someone turned 40. But what does change, and often gradually, is the metabolic environment your body is operating in. After 40, several factors often begin stacking together. Muscle mass declines if you are not actively resisting it with strength training. Insulin sensitivity can worsen over time, especially with inactivity and weight gain. Visceral fat tends to increase, particularly around the abdomen. Sleep quality may decline, which directly affects glucose control. Stress hormones, especially cortisol, may stay elevated more often. In women, perimenopause and menopause can alter appetite, fat storage, and glucose handling. In men, declining activity and body composition shifts can also reduce metabolic resilience. Why does that matter for breakfast? Because breakfast is often the first major glucose challenge of the day. If your first meal is built around rapidly digestible carbohydrates, you may be starting your day with a sharp rise in blood glucose and a corresponding insulin response, especially if you already have some degree of insulin resistance. And that matters because insulin is not just a blood sugar hormone, it is also a storage hormone. When insulin rises significantly, your body is pushed towards storing energy rather than mobilizing it. If this happens daily, over and over, the pattern can slowly reinforce hunger, fat storage, and metabolic dysfunction. That is the part most people miss. They think it's just breakfast. But breakfast is often where the day's metabolic trajectory begins. The oatmeal problem. Not all oats behave the same. The word oatmeal hides a lot of detail. And that detail is exactly where the science becomes interesting. There is a meaningful difference between steel-cut oats, rolled oats, instant oats, flavored instant oat packets with sugar added. These are not interchangeable from a metabolic standpoint. 1. Steel-cut oats. Slower, denser, less processed. Steel-cut oats are the least processed form commonly found in grocery stores. The oat groats are cut into pieces, but the grain structure remains more intact. That means your digestive enzymes have a harder time breaking them down quickly. The result is usually a slower glucose rise and a more gradual glycemic response compared with more processed oat forms. That does not mean steel-cut oats are low carb. They are not. It means they tend to behave more slowly in the body. 2. Rolled oats. Still good, but more accessible. Rolled oats are steamed and flattened. That processing makes them easier and quicker to cook, but it also makes their starch more accessible to digestion. They are still a whole grain and still generally a better choice than refined breakfast cereals, but metabolically, they often produce a faster response than steel-cut oats. 3. Instant oats. The speed trap. Instant oats are designed for convenience. They are processed more heavily, thinner, and easier to digest rapidly. That convenience comes at a metabolic cost: faster digestion, faster glucose absorption, and often a sharper blood sugar rise. This is where many people get caught. Because instant oats still wear the healthy label, people assume they must be metabolically gentle. But convenience and metabolic stability are not the same thing. And if the packet is flavored, brown sugar, maple, honey, apple cinnamon, now you have an even bigger issue: added sugar on top of a rapidly digestible starch. That combination can become a glucose spike machine. What the research actually says about oats and blood sugar. Let's stay precise here. Research consistently shows that oats contain beta-glucan, a soluble fiber with real metabolic benefits. Beta-glucan can increase viscosity in the gut, slow digestion, and help reduce post-meal glucose and insulin responses. A systematic review and meta-analysis found that oat beta-glucan meaningfully reduced postprandial glucose and insulin responses across many trials. That is real, credible evidence. So the message is not oats are bad. The message is the fiber in oats helps, but it does not cancel out the carbohydrate load, portion size, processing level, or toppings. That's the key distinction. In practical terms, oats can be better than many refined breakfast foods, but oats can still raise blood sugar, and more processed oats usually raise it faster. The response is highly affected by what else is in the meal. This is why someone with prediabetes may see a very different response from the same bowl of oatmeal than someone with high insulin sensitivity. And this is also why a person can say, oatmeal works fine for me, while another person experiences a spike, crash, and hunger cycle. Both can be true. The hidden mechanism: why a spike leads to a crash. The real danger is not only the spike itself, it is what happens after the spike. Here's the common pattern. 1. You eat a bowl of oatmeal, especially a processed or oversized one. 2. Blood glucose rises. Insulin rises to clear glucose from the bloodstream. 4. Blood glucose drops. You feel tired, foggy, irritable, or hungry. You snack again. The cycle repeats. This creates what many people call the mid-morning crash. And it is not just a feeling problem, it is a metabolic pattern problem. If you repeatedly trigger this cycle, you may worsen appetite dysregulation and make it harder to maintain stable energy and stable body weight. Over time, frequent high insulin demand can also be part of the broader picture of insulin resistance. This is why breakfast matters so much for people in their 40s, 50s, and beyond. The body often becomes less forgiving of fast carbohydrate loads, especially when those loads arrive without enough protein, fat, or fiber to slow them down. The big mistake? Eating oatmeal like it's a complete meal. One of the biggest reasons oatmeal fails people is that they eat it as a carbohydrate-only meal. A bowl of oats with a little honey and fruit may look healthy on Instagram, but metabolically, it can be too light on protein and too high in fast-digesting carbohydrate. That matters because a breakfast built mostly on carbs often produces faster digestion, higher glucose rise, lower satiety, more hunger later, more temptation to snack. If your goal is to stay full and stable, breakfast should usually be built differently. That does not necessarily mean oats must be banned. It means they should be strategically composed. How to make oatmeal less dangerous. The food matrix strategy. This is where the science gets practical. A food's effect on blood sugar is not just about the food itself, it is also about the food matrix, the combination of ingredients and how they interact inside the digestive system. To reduce the glucose impact of oatmeal, you want to slow down digestion. The easiest way is to build the bowl with components that blunt the glucose rise. Add protein. Protein slows gastric emptying and improves satiety. It also makes breakfast more balanced. Examples: Greek yogurt, skyr, eggs on the side, whey or plant protein isolate, cottage cheese if tolerated. Add healthy fats. Fat also slows digestion and helps reduce the speed at which glucose enters the bloodstream. Examples: chia seeds, ground flaxseed, walnuts, almonds, nut butter in moderate amounts. Add more fiber. The more viscous, gel-forming fiber you can add, the slower the meal tends to behave. Examples: chia seeds, flaxseed, psyllium husk in small amounts, berries instead of dried fruit. Remove the sugar traps. This is non-negotiable if the goal is blood sugar stability. Avoid brown sugar packets, maple sugar flavoring, honey as a health topping, dried fruit in large amounts, sweetened oat packets. Cinnamon is fine. Berries are usually fine in modest amounts. But if you are turning oats into dessert, you are no longer having a metabolic experiment. You are just making a sweet meal and hoping the label saves you. It won't. The scientific nuance: why heart healthy doesn't automatically mean blood sugar friendly. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of oatmeal marketing. Oats are often described as heart healthy because Beta-Glucan can help lower LDL cholesterol. That is a legitimate benefit. But a food can have one benefit and still have trade-offs. That is how nutrition actually works. A heart-healthy claim does not automatically mean low glycemic impact, ideal for insulin resistance, ideal for prediabetes, ideal for a CGM flat breakfast, ideal for large portions. If your breakfast improves one marker but worsens another, the overall picture matters. And in modern metabolic health, blood sugar stability is not a side issue. It is central. Because persistent glucose swings are associated with hunger dysregulation, fatigue, inflammation, and worse long-term metabolic outcomes. So the right question is not, is oatmeal healthy? The right question is, for this person, in this form, in this portion, with these toppings, and at this stage of metabolism, how does oatmeal behave? That is a much smarter question. Why CGM data changes the conversation. This is exactly why continuous glucose monitors are so valuable. A CGM removes the guesswork. It shows you what your body is doing in real time. And what many people discover is this. One person tolerates rolled oats well. Another spikes hard from instant oats. Another does okay only when oats are paired with protein and fat. Another gets a flat response with steel-cut oats, but not with instant oats. Another finds that a small portion is fine, but a large bowl is not. That is the power of personalized metabolic data. And for a channel like DiaSync, this is where the story becomes credible. You are not just repeating internet myths, you are testing them. That is a massive trust advantage. The real-world breakfast hierarchy for metabolic health, the practical hierarchy usually looks something like this. Best option? Protein-forward breakfast. Examples: eggs plus vegetables, Greek yogurt plus seeds and berries, cottage cheese bowl, tofu scramble, leftover dinner protein with vegetables. Better oatmeal option: steel-cut oats, modest portion, protein and fat added. This is the damage-controlled version. Less ideal: rolled oats alone. Still better than sugar cereal, but not optimal for blood sugar stability. Worst option? Instant flavored oats, especially when combined with added sugar, dried fruit, or sweetened milk. That does not mean nobody can eat instant oats. It means that if your goal is stable glucose, appetite control, and long-term metabolic health, they are not the most protective choice. The fear part. What happens if you ignore this pattern? Here is the uncomfortable part. If your blood sugar is spiking every morning and you keep brushing it off because it's just oatmeal, you may be training your metabolism in the wrong direction. You may be reinforcing repeated insulin surges, appetite swings, more snacking, more abdominal fat gain, lower metabolic flexibility, worse post-meal energy. And over time, this pattern can fit into the broader progression toward prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, especially if other risk factors are already present. This is how metabolic damage often happens in real life. Not in dramatic, obvious events, but in small, daily choices that look healthy on the surface. That is the deception.
The hope part. Oatmeal can be modified. Now, let's switch gears, because this is not a story of doom. This is a story of control. If you love oatmeal, you do not necessarily have to eliminate it. You may simply need to stop eating it in the way the marketing industry taught you to eat it. Try this formula. Choose steel-cut oats. Use a smaller portion. Add protein, add fat, add fiber, skip the sugar. Test your response. For example, steel-cut oats, Greek yogurt, chia seeds, walnuts, cinnamon, a small handful of berries. That is a much more metabolically intelligent meal than a plain instant oatmeal packet with honey. And if you are really serious, the best move is to test it against your own body. Check glucose before the meal and again at 1 hour and 2 hours after. The data will tell you whether oatmeal is your friend, your compromise, or your problem.
The final framework. How to think about oatmeal like an investigator. Here is the mindset I want your audience to adopt. Don't ask whether a food is good or bad in isolation. Ask, how processed is it? How large is the portion? What is added to it? What is my insulin sensitivity like? What happens when I eat it with protein and fat? What does my glucose monitor show? That is the difference between passive eating and intelligent metabolic strategy. And that is exactly the kind of thinking that turns a YouTube channel into a trusted reference point. Closing. The breakfast that looks healthy is not always the breakfast that helps you. If there is one lesson here, it is this. Healthy-looking food is not always healthy in practice. Oatmeal can be a smart choice for some people, in some forms, in some portions, and with the right meal structure. But for many adults over 40, especially those dealing with insulin resistance, prediabetes, or stubborn energy crashes, the default bowl of oatmeal is not the safe metabolic sanctuary it is marketed to be. It may be slowing down your mornings. It may be triggering blood sugar spikes. It may be setting up the mid-morning crash that pushes you towards snacks and more sugar. And it may be doing all of this while wearing the label of health food. That is the trap. But once you see it clearly, you can do something about it. You can choose a better oat. You can build a better breakfast. You can use data instead of myths. And you can stop letting a bowl of carbohydrates dictate how your day feels before it even begins. That is the real win. Not fear, not restriction, control.